appreciate your time, alhamdulillah, coming out my way. I live a bit in the wilderness of Melbourne.
It was amazing, man. I appreciate it because I haven't seen like the landscape, you know, and the rural parts. It's really beautiful because sometimes when you're in the center of cities, you just see the urbanized environment. Yeah. So thank you for inviting me. Jazakallah khairah.
My claim to try to adhere to the Sufi path is trying to stay in the wilderness areas.
Wow. You're in Khalwa. You're in Uzla.
Yeah, when you come out this way.
Beautiful.
You get your prayer beads out.
Alhamdulillah. I'm very honored to be here with you, Brother Tanzim, and I want to thank you and your fellow colleagues and brothers in Cave for the amazing, tremendous efforts you're doing to create a space for Muslims to disseminate knowledge to Muslims and for Muslims to own their own voices and their narratives. This is very important in this day and age. We live in a day and age where, unfortunately, mass media and specifically the majority mass media is distorting and, you know, denouncing and denying, you know, the voices of Muslims. We see it in what's happening with our beloved brothers and sisters in Palestine. May Allah make it easy for all of them. And we see it also with the Islamophobia that is being normalized. So we need independent Muslim media outlets and podcasts like Brothers in Cave. So I urge all of your fellow listeners to share these pods and all these episodes that our fellow brothers are doing and this podcast to your fellow brothers and sisters. This is amazing. So I'm very honored to be with you guys.
The kind words.
Jazakallah khairah.
I think we're all in it together in that sense because, you know, mashallah, you're part of a huge initiative, worldwide initiative. Would you like to share some words about the initiative, how you started? Because I feel that whenever I connect with different guests from all around the world, we always have a shared interest. So similarly to how you just described, like what we need to do as a community. It's not like, you know, we're rivaling each other or having that. It's all about, you know, we're trying to achieve the same objective, right? Like for us, we want to have important discussions with different guests about important topics, you know, politics, spirituality, etc. And like I was talking to you offline, like I leave it to the audience to make up their mind about what they think is right or wrong, but I just want to have those conversations. And I believe that people are intelligent enough, and especially with the topics that you and the professor are discussing, and flying to Sydney, Melbourne, etc. Like I attended the workshop last Sunday. It was to do with Rumi and Ghazali as well, and linking it to spirituality and reclaiming it from the Islamic narrative and the Islamic perspective. It's all very important that we do that, because unfortunately, like what I talk to about my friends and family, it's like we don't grow up with this knowledge. When it comes to Islam, we sort of have to find a discovery in the wilderness of Melbourne, or
Mashallah.
But
that's,
you know what I mean, like because you actually mentioned offline, but Dr. Sami is actually like a friend of mine as well.
He's my teacher. Actually.
Alhamdulillah. Yeah, like I've studied texts under Dr. Sami. He actually did the khutbah at my walima as well.
Beautiful,
so yeah, alhamdulillah.
Beautiful. So I'm going to meet him hopefully tomorrow. When mashallah. He's one of the great scholars of our generation.
Mashallah, yeah. And he's actually really interesting because he lived in Sydney, but then he went to UK to study and then went around the world and he came back. But he's like a hidden gem. How many people are so famous worldwide on YouTube and TikTok and all that, but then Dr. Sami is like that hidden gem. In
ISIP, the International Students of Islamic Psychology, he's not hidden. We know about him, and we are very proud of him. And I am very proud of have had the honor to study under him in Cambridge Muslim College. And you guys have gems in Australia. Honestly, like I'm so amazed now when I've been here a couple of days, being with you and other brothers and sisters in different organizations, institutions, so many infrastructures, so many great initiatives, and you guys are collaborating with one another. And this is all the way that we should, sharing is caring, or as we say, sharing is khairing. So it's about uniting for the sake of Allah and for the sake of building communities, because this is the day and age of community building, you know. We don't have a khilafah right now, so we need to build communities and many cosmos that could together unite to become a macrocosmos, which is also the tasawwuf tradition of speaking about insan, and then insan al-kabir, which is the great insan, which is the universe. The connection between you and the universe goes through sohbah, companionship, and also community building. So this is very important in our path, and I'm very pleased and honored to be with you, brother. And yeah, I'm looking forward to our conversation, inshallah.
You mentioned suhbah, and how important is that? Like when I, growing up in Australia, and the sort of friends that I was acquainted with in primary and high school, they weren't the best circles to be around. They weren't horrible. They weren't like, you know, doing hard drugs and this and that. So alhamdulillah, I didn't go to that extent, but they're sort of not on the right path either. And so with those non-Muslim crowds, and for me, you realize like when you, alhamdulillah, become a bit more practicing or hang with the right people, you can just feel the barakah in the air. You can feel that connection to Allah a bit more. And especially if they are students of knowledge, you want to become even better and work towards the akhirah and reorient your life around that. And I feel that, because I was actually part of the ISIP, I am still part of it, the WhatsApp group as well. And all the sort of discussions that happen, all the people that, you know, the content that you put out or the lectures that you give, it's all there. And it's like a community of people trying to strive towards something bigger and better, right?
And we are so grateful for Allah for allowing us to connect, brother, because this is the blessing of the pandemic. I will tell you the truth. I mean, I wouldn't sit here with you if it wasn't for the pandemic. And I'll tell you why. Because during the pandemic, during the lockdowns, suddenly all resources became accessible online. And obviously we had digitalization before, but it was kind of like still like semi-used in a way. And suddenly we were not able to meet physically. All the conferences, all the lectures, all the seminars and different topics and themes needed to become accessible online. All the university programs just became accessible online. We started to understand what is Zoom, for instance, or all these, you know, applications. And I was just a seeker of knowledge, you know, trying to figure out avenues and connecting with others with regards to Muslim mental health and Islamic psychology, because it's such a huge need, both in my community in Sweden where I live, but also internationally, of course. And then I just, you know, started to join a couple of conferences online, a couple of participants. We started to connect, and then we started to create WhatsApp groups just for discussions and resource sharing related to Islamic psychology and Muslim mental health. And the rest is history. Today we have a movement, 30 chapters all over the world, 35,000 members, 90 countries, nationalities, doing projects, initiatives, lectures, research, supervision, you name it, in over 10 different languages. So it's kind of like a blessing in the sense that the pandemic, because, you know, we think that sometimes something is bad, and this is Islamic psychology, you know. Imam Ghazali, rahimahullah, he teaches us that we learn things by its opposite, right? So how can we know what is good if we don't know what is bad? How can we know that that is Jannah if we don't know that there is a Jahannam, you know? So we learned through the pandemic, which was a struggle, a trial, that openings can come by sohbah, companionship, beyond the physical, but also in digital spheres. And now we have this blessed movement, and hopefully we can be of service for the Australian community as well, inshallah.
And I think it is a dire need. So I was talking to you offline about how I dabble with different subjects and topics in university, and one of them was psychology.
MashaAllah.
So I did basically what you call equivalent first year psychology subjects in university, and it was a real journey for me personally within university, because as I was saying, I did philosophy subjects, I did history subjects, etc. Right? So you get exposed to a lot of ideas, thoughts, etc. from different thinkers, and whether, you know, alive or in the past. And for example, in philosophy, when you're doing weeks such as there was a week topic that we did about good and evil, the problem of evil, God's existence, all that, right? And obviously they're coming from the non-Muslim angle, right? So they're not going to cater those discussions in an Islamic paradigm.
Exactly.
So you as a Muslim have to sort of navigate that on your own, right? Which is a bit daunting, but alhamdulillah, if you have that right sohbah companions, especially through my time at the ISOC and MSAs in when I was in Sydney, it becomes a lot easier in that regard. But on top of that, for example, in history, you come across decolonial theory, then you try to make sense of it. But so similarly in psychology, there was a big problem that I kept encountering, is that denying the soul. Right? It's almost like non-existent, right? It's either the mind or the body, and all the experiments that try to almost have philosophical undertones, such as a deterministic outlook.
Yes.
And so that kind of erases Islamic theology in the sense of God or existence of God, all that kind of conversations, which is becomes a hard pill to swallow. And unfortunately, I know of people that may not have been practicing Muslims, right? But went down a different path from a theological perspective, because they get misguided about different ideas, but they don't have that right orientation from Islamic paradigm to know how to encounter such conversations. So for me, it was like a big wake-up call, but, you know, alhamdulillah, with the right people around you becomes a lot easier. And so when we establish, like you're doing with ISIP, the right communities, people that are passionate about psychology, that want to go into university, they know how to, you know, with the resources and everything you do, they know how to approach those kind of questions and how to orient it in the Islamic perspective as well. Beautiful. So alhamdulillah.
You're right. I mean, we live in a day and age, the century and the day and age of anthropocentrism, human centrism. We live in a very overtly narcissistic societies, and psychology today, mainstream psychology, I should say, is a reflection of that, you know, the denial of the soul, you know, the denial of our connection with our Lord, and where the creation becomes the creator, you know. It's almost like Frankenstein syndrome, you know. Frankenstein was a creation and then he went against the professor who created him. And we are now a creation that is trying to take the position of the creator and denouncing higher ethical standards, moral frameworks. It's all about do it yourself, be yourself, whatever you want, express it. No guidance, no higher ethical standards.
Hedonism as well.
Hedonism, of course. I mean, hedonism is part of modernity's philosophical standard. During the Greek, during the ancient Greeks, hedonism was outskirt ideology. It was not. Was a fringe ideology in a sense. In many ways, today it's being normalized. And in that, we have the psychology without the soul. You know, a psychology that has gone against its etymological meaning. I mean, psyche, as we know, means soul in Greek, and logos means teachings, right? So today, it's not psychology, it's psychology with bedun psyche, without the soul. And this is something that has affected us, the reductionism, reducing man into machine, or reducing man into just being governed by lust and desires. In the Islamic tradition, we believe in lust and desires as something good, innate good, but it needs to be balanced. It needs to be, an equilibrium in it. And that equilibrium we get through our spiritual practices and through, Quran and Sunnah as the framework, right? So this affects us, this affects our mental health, this affects our way of dealing with our, ontological reality as human beings. And that's why we're in a state of confusion today, and the confusion, we can see how that affects our communities, our families, the nucleus of the society. And when the objectives of Sharia is not governing our society, then we also see that this will become a very, a society based upon your impulses or your own definition of things. And we know that human beings are not insan al-kamil. We are insan, humans filled with flaws. Now we have templates, insan al-kamil being the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And in that, we know how to come into equilibrium, because the Prophet ﷺ was the example of balance. And psychology is all about bringing things into balance. So when you don't have these type of templates, which modernity doesn't, then we see what the what the result is, which is now shattered families and societies where it's all about feeling good rather than feeling God, or being good rather than being with God. And there's nothing bad with feeling good, don't get me wrong, or being with good. But why are you feeling good? Because you want to please Allah. It's good to feel good. It's good to take care of your body, take care of your health, being holistic to yourself and being good. Why is it good to be good? Because then you please God, because God loves you to be good. So you have a standard, right? And that's why, the psychology, mainstream psychology is very allopathic. It's all about medicine and medication. So they just want to treat the symptom, not the root cause. Why? Because the root cause will probably mean that they need to change the philosophy of the society. Because this is the philosophy of the society and the philosophy of modernity that is causing the symptom, but they don't want to cancel the society. They want to cancel the symptom. Because as long as we cancel symptom and individuals, then we can still keep this unhealthy society in place, because people are, benefiting from it, at least those who are governed the society. They don't want to shape or reshape, because then they will lose their power. And this is the medical pharmaceutical industry, for instance. They want to have allopathic medicine. They don't want to speak about the humor theory. theory. They don't want to speak about alternative medicine, let alone Islamic psychology. They don't want to speak about naturopathy or homeopathy or traditional Chinese medicine or, Ayurvedic medicine and all these medical traditions, which I think there's a lot of wisdom in them, Of course, as Muslims, we should always engage in other traditions, knowledge, mindfully, we need to, in a sense, filter the things that we utilize according to Quran and Sunnah, but there's so many great things in indigenous approaches to health. But the medical industry, the pharmaceutical company, they don't want to have that. They want to have the allopathic medicine because they make money out of it. And we can see it with the whole COVID situation. How do we know that this is the only solution? And we as Muslims, we are not against chemical medicine. We're not against vaccination. Actually, Muslims were the ones who created vaccination historically, even seen on all of the great scholars. What we're against when the allopathic medicine is saying that this is the only avenue, this is the only way. And what I try to tell my clients as a counselor and as an Islamic psychology practitioner is that, yes, medication could be good, sometimes it's needed, but there are also alternatives, It's not only a pill and then you're chill, right? Because that's what they are induced in. Check the alternative also. How do you eat? How do you sleep? How do you live a holistic lifestyle? And insurance companies don't want this. They want 8 sessions and then you need to get rid of the symptom. So they just want to put a bandage or a plaster on the symptom rather to see the core cause. Please forgive me, I'm very passionate when I speak.
There's a lot to always discuss in these topics. There's so much, honestly, you're talking about, you alluded to at the beginning about happiness. And that reminds me that, unfortunately, so how would you talk when someone, because you mentioned Ayurvedic medicine or humor theory, because Islamic tradition has a rich history with humor theory and how it's applied. Yes. There's a lot of Muslims even now talk about it as if it's like backwards theory and it's in the past. We have better, more updated knowledge and technology in this current day and age, so we can discard that rubbish nonsense theories. Yeah. So how would you respond to that?
Yeah, that is also I don't like to speak about people. I always want to speak about structures, but I think that is the arrogance of our generation, that we just think that we know better than our ancestors, and that's not true. Yes, we have access to some type of technology and, access to research, which is built upon cumulative knowledge that has been built upon each other's work for generations. Of course, I'm not denying that we do have access to resources in a way that maybe our ancestors didn't, but nevertheless, it is partially in the nafsani approach of our generation when we say that we know better than our ancestors. In the Islamic, thought tradition, we always say the best generation was the generation of the Sahaba, the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, and the Salaf and the Tabi'een. This is the best generations, We learn from them. We try to look at the sanad of the hadith through them, whether it's sahih or not sahih. We believe that these are the greatest generations, right? So looking today in modernity and say, no, we're better than them, of course not. Now, has knowledge been developed since then? Of course, but from an Islamic point of view, it's been developed from these generations. And of course, also leads to the Prophet ﷺ and of course to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to Wahi. So modernity in its approach has, and this is beyond Islam, has this notion that we don't believe in tradition. We don't believe in tradition. We are better than tradition. We are going against tradition. To be tradition is to be conservative. Conserve meaning you want to hold on something old. We need something new. The new is better. But is the new better? I'm looking at your TV in front of me as an example. Please forgive me, brother. I love your TV. But I remember when I was young, and my father bought the old TV. I had it for like 10, 15 years at least. Today you buy a TV because of the materialistic mass production that we see where things needs to be cheap and the price needs to be done. It breaks after 2 years. So even a traditional TV was better. Now look at the traditional arts of Islam or the traditional, craftsmanship of Islam. The Persian carpet, the Moroccan carpet as an example. You could have it for hundreds of years. It will not destroy. But go and buy a carpet in IKEA. It will be destroyed within 2 years. So who says that the new is better than the old? Yeah. Who says that the new is better than the tradition? The tradition had ihsan, beauty into it. And bring it back to humor theory and all these things that you were referring to. Listen, there is hikmah in everything. Even in modernity. We as ISIP, as international students of Islamic psychology, myself as a counselor and as an Islamic psychology practitioner, and through the teachings of my beautiful teachers, we're not against modernity in the sense that we're not against new knowledge. We're against modernity's very anthropocentric thing of saying we know better than others. We are the best generation. That is very anthropocentric. That I am against. But if new knowledge comes that is, according to Quran and Sunnah, we will not disregard it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us to seek knowledge, to look at His sign in nature, to understand Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's creation, and through them we will understand parts of, for instance, His divine names and attributes we can understand through creation when we do tafakkur and contemplation. Of course, we will never fully understand Allah because Allah is bigger than everything that we know, everything that we see, everything that we hear, but at least we can connect with Him through His creation by at least understanding parts of it, how to deal with it. Allah says to us in the Holy Quran that there is remedies for all diseases that are there, and this is also something that the Prophet ﷺ says, right? For every disease there is a cure, So we need to be curious because we know that the disease is something good in it because it might purify you, and the cure is out there and Allah has created all of it, right? So curiosity we're not against, and in that we can learn new knowledge. But to disregard traditional knowledge and say that this is bad or this is not good, who said that the allopathic medicine is the best? Who said that modern medicine is the best? Modern medicine is first and foremost built upon traditional medicine, but they have chemicalized it. But all these ideas of chemicals comes from plants and comes from, herbal, extract that you made chemicals out of it. And the second is that, and in a sense, traditional medicine has been developed in thousands of years of, experimental, knowledge, and also, in a sense, empirical research, because the Hakim tried the remedy and then learned from it and passed it on, and then they tried and they failed, and then they took that and they learned from generation to generation to generation, and they were close to the source. They were close to nature. We're disconnected from nature as modern human beings today. So we think that this pill just comes from nowhere. It's almost like it's magic today. We don't understand where it comes from. While these people, the Hakim of our tradition, they were close to nature. They understood the different nuances of nature. And in that sense, they were closer to the source of health than what we are today. They could understand which water is good for you, which leaves you could create tea with. And this allowed them to have understanding of Allah's creation in a much better way than what we have, because today we are trying to govern over Allah's creation, including in medical remedies and medical treatments. Now, we're not against surgery, brother. We're not against even chemical medication if it's needed. For instance, for an OCD patient, the subscription is that they sometimes need SRIs, and in combination with talk therapy. So we're not against that, but we're against that that's the only alternative that is presented by modern medicine. And then that comes, as you were referring, all these, Unani Tib, or, Nabawi, or all these traditional medicine in our Islamic tradition, but also in other traditions like Ayurvedic medicine. This is nonsense. This is no empirical wisdom in it. What do you mean? Why is it nonsense when we see that it has helped so many people? And what is empirical research, by the way? I mean, empirical research is important. It was the Muslims who created empirical research. I mean, Ibn Sina, all these great, Muslim scientists, they created empirical research. But also, we believe in wahi. We believe in the unseen. We believe in revelation. So Imam Ghazali, for instance, he told that empirical research is great in all sciences except the metaphysical sciences. So we believe in something higher, and there it will always be a friction between us as believers and people that are secular. That's just the case. But I believe that Muslims are the bridge between modern medicine and traditional medicine, because we actually do believe in empirical research. We do believe in the development of medicine. We're not, in a sense, rejecting science the way that the Judeo-Christian notion has done, or the Catholic Church did historically, at least, by rejecting scientific research. The whole aspect of accusing Galileo Galilei for being a blasphemous just because he said to the Pope that the world is round, the globe is round and not flat, right? We're not against that. We do believe in science, but we just don't reject who created everything, which is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we always induce Tawheed. So we need to be firm, brother. We need to tell people that we believe in modern medicine, but we don't believe in it as the only solution. We believe in holistic medicine, where modern medicine can have a role, but we have other traditions that also have wisdom. It doesn't mean that all traditional medicine, I'm speaking about other traditions, of course, like Ayurvedic medicine, have the truth either. There are things in other traditional medicine that is not congruent with the Quran and Sunnah and with our epistemological knowledge. Nevertheless, curiosity should be there, and we should definitely stand up for a variety of practices according to Quran and Sunnah, inshallah.
With the advent of the Industrial Revolution, and as a result of how our society structures and the nature of the capitalist societies that we're in, we have that urge to instrumentalize nature for our nafs and for our desires, right? And fulfill that, get that dopamine hit, and not be in tune or in sync with nature, but just kind of use it for our nafsi desires. And there's a lot you can talk about within that advent at that point in time, in that context. But essentially, we as Muslims, if we only rely on the knowledge that's in this society and that's it, and not actually engage or really be exposed to our tradition or traditional sciences, all we're going to be, and I have this conversation a lot with my friends and family too, will basically be at the heart of a capitalist Muslims, right?
Yeah.
Like, we can just be Muslims that do our 9 to 5, and I mean, I sort of fall into that bracket, but just do your 9 to 5, just do your adhkar, do your quote unquote spirituality to give you that little buzz, and do your prayers, and that's it. But Islam is more than just that, right? It's a way of life. You should be working towards something. You should be engaging with the community in some way, shape or form. We're not expected to revolutionize the political systems that we're in, but we should have that or reorient the way that we think. So if we only engage with the capitalist nature of society and not essentially go back to our tradition, we'll just be a particular privileged Muslim in this society, but not necessarily what Islam wants us to be, right? Because, like, for example, when it comes to politics, I think I actually briefly mentioned to you before the episode that there was a history in the Australian context where 9/11 happened, the war on terror situation was occurring, governments were cracking down in Muslim homes. A lot of Muslims, like, nothing, it's not wrong, because that's the sort of, we'll sort of thrusted into that situation where we're hyper-policed, Islamophobia was on a high. We were just playing the whole, good Muslim, bad Muslim narrative. We're just saying, no, we're actually good. Like, we're peaceful Muslims, and look at the verses in the Quran. Like, they're not, there's no warlike verses and all that. So, like, you've suddenly adopted those Islamic positions unknowingly, but then you also pass that down to your kids, like, as if, you have to be a good Samaritan to just be a good Muslim. Does that make sense? 100%. But that's what the state wants you to be, basically neutralized, right? To just be a particular Muslim for the convenience of the state, right? Exactly. So that's just one example of how society may shape us to be a particular Muslim conveniently for the state. But aside from that, there's so many other aspects in life and within psychology where it's like, we can't just be the Western when it comes to psychology, right? Obviously, we can adopt and take on board their technology or their ways of thinking in some aspects that can aid our project as Muslims in the current day and age, but we can't just adopt it wholesale and take it on board and not question it at all, right? And because we actually do have a rich history in psychology, Islamic spirituality. It's like when you engage with Ghazali's works, like, with Dr. Samir, I've studied Ghazali's texts under him, and it's like, gives you that reorientation about, because we talked about, what it means, how can we be happy in this society? That's an interesting question, right? But then it's like the Western has defined happiness in a certain way, right? So it's like dopamine hits and maintaining that, right? But in saying that, we as Muslims know that that's only a temporary form of happiness, but we should be attaining that pleasure or that sakina or that aspect of our Islamic spirituality that we have to strive towards, right? And when you, like, as Ghazali, it was funny when I was at your workshop on Sunday, because I went with my brother-in-law and my father-in-law, and I was like, So when it comes to Ghazali, there's so much like, mashallah, because I've read his autobiography, and it's like so inspiring, like
it is.
Becoming such an intellectual figure, but then kind of letting go or foregoing that to be in khalwa and to be in that spiritual seclusion. There's that famous story that he was I think sweeping or cleaning, or is a janitor in a school, and they're teaching his books, and he's just like outside the window of that classroom.
Subhanallah.
And he's just the cleaner at
That's
that.
amazing.
How crazy is that? Subhanallah.
Amazing.
But he explained, like, through all those experiences about what it means to, in deliverance of error, attain truth, right? And that spirituality that can be attained through the Sufi way, right? Or the Sufi path. And that, like, subhanallah, like, when I witness or when I see my teachers or people that I look up to on that path, and you can see, like, that spiritual state that they're in terms of the heart being content, that sweetness that they taste, right? That's unlike any Western psychology can ever discuss. You can't, like, you can't talk about it. You can't, like, put it under a microscope and analyze it, right? You have to do the work. You have to do spiritual work, subhanAllah, right? And this is what I mean, like this, and when we talk about, like, humor theory, all that sort of stuff, that's kind of can branch off from those kind of topics. And our tradition is so rich and full of that knowledge, and it's all about engaging and really understanding it and taking it from then, making it even more and adding it to that field, right?
Exactly. And that's, you're touching on something very beautiful, brother. Thank you for sharing. I want to interview you and get to know you, mashallah. You're so knowledgeable. May Allah bless you. I love it. The thing is, as you say, and I agree with you 100%, we need to bring back curiosity. I actually wrote a paper when I was studying at Cambridge Muslim College about the culture of curiosity. How can we revive that in modern time? And I spoke about it from an Islamic point of view, because our traditional scholars, like Imam Ghazali and all these amazing scholars, they were curious. It was not like they just accepted everything that they studied. I mean, Imam Ghazali, as you know, he wanted to understand the philosophers, so he studied philosophy, and he became more knowledgeable in it than the counterparts that he wanted to give, I want to say, constructive feedback to, because, you know, our traditional scholars never did character assassination to one another. They had adab al-ikhtilaf. They respected and they appreciated ikhtilaf. And we need to bring back adab al-ikhtilaf. It's fine to have different points of view. As long as, you know, we can have a sound communication, that's fine. I mean, we are united in Quran and Sunnah as Ahl al-Sunnah wa Jama'ah. And then we have four madahib. Habib Omar, he mashallah, he says, I remember this quote, that these four madahib is a blessing to all of us, because there's four paths towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You know, amazing. So this adab al-ikhtilaf, this, as Dr. Shenturk, one of my teachers, says, this multiplexity comes from unity first. The problem with modernity is that there is no unity. Everybody is doing their own theories. Everybody is their own masters. We know that there is not a lot of masters, but we know that there is a lot of people doing mastery. There's difference between master and mastery. Maulana and a mastery is I could master, I have mastery in freestyle rapping, for instance, or being a counselor. You have mastery in journalism or in, you know, in programming. Master, it's just people who've been into the path, been both studying aqlani, cognitively, but also experientially, which is qalbani, with the heart, for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, right? That's when you can come to the level of master, right? Nevertheless, our tradition of curiosity needs to be revived. I think part of why we are less curious today and we reject things as this is, let's say, to study that's wrong, that's against Islam, that is bid'ah, or, you know, and we have so we have two extreme reactions. And I just want to speak about where the reaction comes from and the two extreme and the spectra, and then what could be one solution, Allahu A'lam. So modernity came through colonialism, and a lot of our ways of dealing with knowledge became, either discredited or we, through colonial pressure, we were denied it, right? So for instance, one thing that the British did, and the French and other colonial powers, they secularized our school systems in the Muslim world. and the secularization was subtle. So it's not that, at least the British, they didn't take away the madrasas per se, or the universities, the Islamic university per se. But if you look at Islamic universities, the secularization led that they became, they structured the fields of the studies in two realms: religious studies and then rest, which is so-called secular studies. They didn't use the word secular studies. So chemistry and biology and psychology was so-called humanistic, or STEM, or all, secular studies. And then you had religious study, which is fiqh, or akhlaq, or all these hadith and all these religious studies. Historically, before colonization, this was not the case. When Ibn Sina, or Al-Farabi, or Al-Kindi, or Ibn Miskawayh, or Al-Razi, all these great chemists or biologists or psychologists or sociologists, when they were studying or doing research, they were integrating it with their deen, with so-called Islamic studies, So Ibn Sina, when he tried to understand chemistry, was to understand Allah. So for him, this is Islamic studies, and this is how we should see it as Muslims. And when this segregation or disintegration came about, I think this has affected our position of understanding that everything is related to one another. And with that came also the normalization of thoughts and paradigms and philosophies, which is not congruent with the Islamic paradigm, right? And in that, we are sitting here as modern Muslim in this generation in a reactionary position of reacting towards this, colonization of our minds. So one way of reacting, which is one extreme position, is to just discredit all traditions. We should just, follow this and this and this, which is how you follow Quran and Sunnah. This is just one way of following Quran and Sunnah, one way of applying Quran and Sunnah. This is one type of reaction, which is on one extreme spectrum. And then on the other extreme spectrum, you have this tokenism. Just take whatever you want. You don't need to make it congruent to Quran and Sunnah. Take it as it is. We are modern now. We should liberalize everything. That is an other extreme reaction. In the middle is how Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah used to handle the interaction with other types of sciences and studies, which is to filter it according to Quran and Sunnah. Be curious. Don't reject it, because we know that Imam Shafi'i speaks about bid'ah hasana, for instance, good so-called innovation, like you can integrate things that are not against Quran and Sunnah. But at the same time, we don't like these liberals or these so-called people that adhere to the token position, just internalize whatever without properly investigating if it's according to Quran, Sunnah, and Sharia, right? Because Sharia is very important, right? This is the majority position of our tradition, right? And this is the middle ground. And in that can curiosity come, because our traditional scholars were able to be curious because they were grounded in Tawheed. They were grounded in Quran and Sunnah. Many of them were, faqih, or they were, qadis. They were like trained in Quran and Sunnah. They were proper scholars, and they had that groundedness that allowed them to be curious without going astray. Today, either you're curious and you go astray because you're not grounded, which is one of the reactions of, colonization and modernity, or you try to ground yourself so much that you lose your dynamicism, because these traditional scholars like Imam Ghazali, they were dynamic as well, right? So that middle ground comes from grounding ourselves in our Islamic epistemology, ontology, Quran and Sunnah, the sacred disciplines, and from there we can be curious. And if we as people that are in beginning of our seeking, as talib al-ilm, we should always have, scholars with us, teachers with us, and always ask for, nasiha and guidance from our teachers. And in that, find ways of being curious. And if we bring back curiosity, rooted in Quran and Sunnah, grounding us, then we can actually find wisdom in many traditions, and then we filter it. And then you will appreciate your own tradition first and foremost, because ultimately our tradition is the most holistic. And of course, this is the path of the last messenger of Allah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So we know that we are adhering to the Sunnah of the seal of the prophets, and he came to perfect religion. religion, and the last religion that will be revealed to human beings is Islam. So we know that as Muslims, you know, and we don't need anything else than that. We know this is the finalized, revelation that came through the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So in that, with that, we can have curiosity, and in that, we don't need to be reactionary anymore. We can be actionary, because we need to also, reaction is that colonization has created a lot of diseases of the heart and the soul and the mind. Okay, that's important to acknowledge. What is the action? And the action could be to bring back curiosity, which will be the balanced point of view, inshallah.
That's a very good reminder about curiosity. When I was doing classes with Dr. Samir, I might be butchering this, but one week he was actually explaining like a hierarchy or like a tree diagram of different subjects or topics. So now, like in this current day and age, many people, a lot of Westerners, put science and the scientific method on like as if it's like fact and truth in of itself and the only truth, right? And everything has to be verified through the scientific method. But what Dr. Samir was explaining is like when it comes to Quran, Sunnah, that's obviously at the top, and then you have like a flow or a tree diagram that kind of like you mentioned, chemistry, Ibn Sina, getting to know Allah. So all these different topics like mathematics, chemistry would be under it, but then they'll facilitate that sort of logic in order for you to understand Quran, Sunnah better, or facilitate that closeness to Allah. So all these other topics that come in that exist in this world kind of facilitate that to the top of the tree, which is like the Quran and Sunnah. So that diagram was really important for me to visualize that this is how we should view these subjects. It's facilitating all that, right? I don't know if it was at the top or if it was like Quran Sunnah is like the root of the tree and everything else kind of facilitates or grows out from it. Yeah. So either way, but it's about understanding where the importance of different topics lies, whereas the modern Westerner be like, okay, no, scientific method, this and that. And what's interesting is like we were talking about our tradition, what our tradition says, like these kind of topics, like in this case, the scientific method, like very adjacent conversations were had and discussions were had within our tradition. Like Ghazali talked about it, and then he actually wrote a whole book about how reliable is, you know, the physical universe, or what we observe just from an empirical standpoint, right? And that's where he actually makes the case for Sufism and spirituality and all that, and the truth and nature of truth, all those kind of important conversations. So it's in our tradition, but you know, it's important that we highlight it as much as possible. And through, you know, organizations such as yourself, like alhamdulillah, we're able to be acquainted more with these subjects and topics and inshallah, be close to Allah.
Inshallah, I think it's important, and I think that we need to be curious but grounded curious. Be multiplex, but find unity in Quran and Sunnah. And I think the Ottomans were ambassadors for this, you know. They were, for instance, in the Ottoman Empire, you had like courts for the Hanafis and the Shafis and the Malikis and the Hanbalis, and even for the Jews and the Christians. Like, so that's kind of like the multiplexity, at least within Ahl al-Sunnah, brings the unity through the gaze and through the groundedness of Quran and Sunnah. As you said, with this way that Dr. Samir approached it, which is amazing. This is what I've been taught from my beautiful teachers. And I think with curiosity, we won't reject, but we won't assimilate it or integrate it either until we are mindful. I've always believe in mindful integration. Because if it's not mindful, it can become assimilation, and you don't know what you're assimilating to, you know? So this is it. And this is something we need to do also for our mental health, because our mental health needs Islamic psychology. But in that, we're also open to see, is there new wisdom that we can bring in? Like the whole discussion of artificial intelligence. What shall we do with it? You know, Allahu Alam, you know, in the end of the day, I rely on my teachers' opinions with regards to these issues. But generally, when I ask my teachers, you know, there's nothing wrong to engage in things, but we need to do it mindfully, you know. And I think we as Muslims, we should own spaces, you know. We should build and own spaces so that these tools can be of favor for our, you know, spiritual growth. And in that, we need curiosity and we need economical resources, obviously.
Within psychology, there's different tools or different ways of operating. So, for example, a CBT or psychotherapy or psychoanalytical tools. Yeah. What has been your experience with those tools? Are they effective? Are they useful? And how do we engage with them as Muslims? And do you find that there's better alternative through the Islamic tradition that can help and be better than those tools?
Of course, I believe that the Islamic tradition has better tools to offer. I think Tawheed and the tools that we can see in the Tasawwuf tradition and also in the tradition of Ilm al-Nafs and are great tools, or in the Akhlaq tradition, the Islamic ethic tradition, of course. But nevertheless, I would also say that there is benefits in CBT as well. I mean, CBT, it was the Muslims who pioneered in CBT. I'm sure you know about Abu Zayd al-Balkhi, rahimullah, the great, Persian Sunni scholars of Balkh in modern day, Afghanistan, who wrote pieces of work called The Sustainers of the Soul, where he specifically comes with, interventions, suggestions in dealing with, trauma, dealing with maladaptive, thinking or, cognitive distortion, which we can today call CBT, for instance, right?
My bookshelf. I should have put it here.
Yeah, mashallah. But you put other beautiful books here. The Seerah of the Prophet ﷺ with Dr. Yasir Ghadi and the Misnavi with Rumi, mashallah. So essentially, surrounded by this one I haven't read, I need to check it out. So essentially we also have
I'll actually expand on that book now that you bring it up, but
inshallah, please do.
I have a lot of criticism with this book.
I haven't read it, so inshallah we can expand on that. But definitely what I would say is that CBT has a lot of tools that are congruent with Quran and Sunnah. I studied CBT, I studied PDT, which is essentially psychoanalysis. Some of it is not congruent with Quran and Sunnah, but there are tools there that you can use that are congruent with Quran and Sunnah. Like, for instance, speaking about certain ways of how childhood traumas can affect your contemporary health. It's quite valid. When it comes to other tools, we have in positive psychology, acceptance and commitment therapy, which is very congruent with the whole notion of rida and acceptance in Islamic tradition, that we accept that we're in the situation right now. It doesn't mean that it cannot change. It doesn't mean that it's forever. It means that we believe in Qadr Allah, but it doesn't mean that we cannot accept the pain. Just because you accept Qadr Allah doesn't mean that you shouldn't accept the pain that comes with losing a relative or whatever. The pain is actually making you human, because if you didn't have pain, then you're an angel, and we're not angels. So humanness comes with pain, comes with joy, comes with all these emotions that Allah has given us. So acceptance and rida allows us to accept the moment, the pain, without questioning Qadr Allah. And when you are with the pain, instead of fighting the pain or denying the pain or fleeing from the pain, instead you can flee to the pain in the sense that you absorb, you're accepting being with it, and you don't use your energy to deny it or to be frozen by it, because then it will become paralyzed and then it will become a pathology. But if you accept it, and in that you accept Qadr Allah without spiritually bypassing yourself. What do I mean with spiritual bypassing? Not accepting that you have emotional needs of crying, because your view of spirituality is to not cry. That actually will allow you after a while to come to the position of desensitization, which is also a Western theory, in a sense of when you can have hierarchies of fears, and by exposing yourself to the fear with right coping mechanism, then with time the fear will be reduced to not be as strong, and with time you will put it in the periphery of your focal point. This is acceptance and commitment therapy.
That's in Balkhi's book.
That is in Abu Zayd al-Balkhi's book.
He talks about the fear and
mitigate, and that's desensitization, right?
That's really interesting.
So this is actually very congruent, and as you mentioned, Abu Zayd al-Balkhi speaks about it. So definitely Islamic psychology has the tools, and then we are also open to Islamization of psychology, which is the ways that the great scholars like Sayyid Naqib al-Atas and others advocated. We're also open for that, and in that hopefully we can find tools and pathways where clients or brothers and sisters who are going through pain and struggles can get healing. Ultimately, of course, the healer is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we are all just vessels of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
You mentioned going back to your what you mentioned about commitment and acceptance.
Yes.
When it comes to processing pain and trauma. So from your experience, because from my understanding, I'm trying to take, because my background is more like temperament theory and knowledge. So when it comes to those kind of issues, or because I'm not a counselor, but obviously you have that vast experience within counseling. Do people come and try to deny that? So for example, someone goes through trauma, someone goes through pain, and they're feeling it, experience it, and they feel it on a physical level too, right? It's like a pain in the heart, and they I know that from a temperament theory lens, there's certain temperaments may be susceptible to distracting themselves, and so they try to, I don't know, I know a lot of non-Muslims, they drink alcohol to try to escape the pain and distract themselves, and that's not like really accepting the pain, right? That's just kind of distracting them. And there's a lot of ways people will try to cope with these experiences. It could be tragedies in life, etc., right? So I don't know if you had your thoughts on that regard, like those experiences when it comes to acceptance or trying to process that trauma, and how a lot of people engage with that. Do they mostly try to distract themselves and try to do other things, or fulfill their desires to try to get that to supersede their feeling of trauma or negative emotions?
That's a great question, brother, and it depends on the person, honestly. But yes, some persons are able to accept, and some people have difficulties to accept, and this is human. I mean, I myself, I'm not better than my clients. I mean, I have a lot of struggles. I have sometimes difficulties to accept things. And then you remind yourself of the importance of Qadar Allah, the importance that there is wisdom, but maybe you don't know it right now. Maybe Allah will, uncover that for you in a year or 2 years, But what we learned through our, work as counselors is that definitely addiction, for instance, is a maladaptive way of coping with trauma. Or coping with loss or longing to something good. The great Western psychologist Gabor Mate, which is one of my favorite non-Muslim psychologists.
My wife linked me. He's coming to Melbourne, I think.
MashaAllah, MashaAllah. Yeah, we're in touch with him actually. So hopefully, may Allah allow us to work with him. So essentially, and I really recommend all of you in Melbourne to listen to him. He's amazing. And he says something very unique. And I'm paraphrasing now, so it's not exactly his quote, but I know this is what he said. I don't know the quote exactly. So he said that for the person who's taken heroin, it's like getting a blanket from a mother that he's longing to, something like that, And really that resonates, because from a fitra-centric point of view, I have been taught by my teachers that our ways of coping with the loss of fitra are multidimensional. When we are born in the dunya, before we come out from the womb of our beloved mothers, we're in a state of full bliss, full sa'adat, full happiness and joy, because we're fully in connection with fitra, in connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's joy, right? And as soon as we come out to dunya, that is the primal wound. Right.
That's so true, because like if you think about it, like us Muslims or every human in the world has a longing to feel better, feel good. They want to lean towards that feeling of feeling better, or that level of perfection, which is nothing wrong, but it kind of fits into what you're saying, that it's because we were in a place of bliss. It's almost like sometimes we want to attain that.
And that's exactly it, brother. So we try to attain that through different means. So the child screams when she or he comes out, right? Until the mom holds the child, and then the child feels soothing. Until the child understands that this transitional object is not perfect, because perfection is only Allah. Because the mom might not always come when you're screaming, and you see that the mom is a human being with a lot of strengths and weaknesses. And then you project that longing to some other mortal objects, and then go forward 10, 15, 20 years, and you still are projecting if you don't get the right guidance or tarbiyah. And then suddenly maybe the drugs can be that. Maybe you're, craving for sugar, or, your craving of working too much will become that projection. And that is a maladaptive coping mechanism of the primal wound, which is your longing to reconnect with fitra. And this is actually something that is part of our spiritual wayfaring as, people that are part of that suluk, because in the end of the day, when we reconnect with fitra, it's going to be a mindful reconnection, which is on a higher spiritual state and psychological state than when we are born. So reconnecting with fitra is not to become a child. Actually, it's on a higher maqam, on a higher spiritual state or psychological state, because this time you're doing it mindfully through your spiritual practices like taskiyat al-nafs, or, riyadat al-nafs, or mujahada al-nafs, or mukhalaf, or all these, spiritual tools. And that's something that we all try to do. So when you say this to people that have different struggles in life, let's say people that have porn addiction or drug addiction or, gambling issues, they get hope, and they understand it. So this is like Islamic psychoeducation, and I really believe that we need to humanize people's experiences and not bypass ourselves, because, the Prophet ﷺ, he was very fine-tuned with his emotions. You know, the hadith of when the Prophet lost his son, Ibrahim. He cried, right? It doesn't mean that he questioned Allah. So it's okay as a man to cry, you know? And then today, sometimes we have cultural narratives that says, man up, don't cry. No, that is actually quite torturing to a young boy to tell him to not cry. I have seen parents telling to their young boys, don't cry, man up. No, it's okay to cry. Of course, everything needs to be in balance, but that's actually a way of connecting with your God-giving emotions, which allows you actually to be a holistic people. And then instead, this child, if he doesn't learn to cry and to express all of his emotions in a healthy way, will then channelize that energy through aggression or excessive aggression instead.
So lack of acceptance in that moment. So as Muslims, we should always be in harmony with our mind, body, and spirit, right?
Exactly.
And so if we have those emotions that we're experiencing, which either someone around us is saying, no, you shouldn't be feeling that or shouldn't be experiencing that, and then you in your insides you don't really process it properly, so it's like a disconnect, right, from your spiritual and the physical, right? Because you're feeling the physical pain, but then you're just like not processing it properly because you're being told not to process it because it's not like manly, and that can have consequences down the line. And what's interesting with for temperament theory, like a lot of people, like what you just mentioned, like if you use, like we know this fact, and that can be and this fact is attained maybe through Western sources or scientific journals or psychology journals. But then with the temperament theory, which made me open my eyes up to a different paradigm or different dimension, was that like to look at each temperament and know how they would have processed that in what way. So like, for example, if it was someone like a choleric or a red temperament was told to basically man up, this and that, they'll probably go on the excess down the line. Like they'll become even more angry because they won't be able to hold it in. They've got so much fire in them, right? It's just going to burst out, right? It's not going to be contained, right? And when it comes to the phlegmatic or the water or the green temperament, I'm referencing disc theory as well. That's why I'm saying the colors as well. This is the book, by the way. That's why it's in the book. Surrounded by idiots.
Tell me.
So that specific temperament would just, because they're more introverted, they'll just keep it to themselves. You'll be buried deep in their conscience, and it'll just be put down in the bottom of the ocean. And you know, they'll just keep bottling up for the rest of their life, and it's going to affect them. They've never had that time to process it, and it's just going to weigh them down. They're going to be even more introverted. They're going to be even more recluse. They're going to not communicate properly, and it's going to really affect them, right? And that's not being in sync with your heart, mind, and soul, right? Wow. So it's all like we have these experiences and we're aware of them, and then if you look at it in and if you compartmentalize in terms of different archetypes of humans, they all react differently to the same stimuli, if that makes sense. So it's really fascinating, and that's why we need so much, study and work in these kind of topics to really bring out the Islamic perspective as well.
Beautiful. No, I agree, and I think that this is why we need to be dynamic. Like Allah Subhanahu wa Taala has created things in us that are all both unique and common. The common is that we're all born in a state of fitra, right? The common is that we're all born as creatures in Tawheed, believing in Tawheed. And then, as also the Prophet says, the parents raised them to become Jews and Christians and Zoroastrians, right? But that's socialized. That's like social upbringing. That's the social effect on you. But spiritually and ontologically, we are born in a state of fitra. But then also in that, we're also born with different struggles, with different humors, with different character traits. And this is the diversity of the creation of Allah. So, and one remedy might not work for you, but might work for me, that is the case. And we know that the remedies of the Sunnah works for all of us, but then how we apply it might be different, So that's why modernity is very monolithic. It's like one solution for everyone.
And they're assuming that each human is the same human. It's like the body, the hand is the hand, therefore the face is the face, the nose is the nose, therefore it's almost like we give this exact medicine or this thing to each person. They're all humans, they're all the same, so it should work the same, but it's not necessarily. You give it's so funny in like Sufi poetry, you talk about like Sufi masters or even intellectual poets, they're always talking about giving the right thing to the right person. So knowing the person, knowing their strengths, weaknesses, and knowing that kind of spiritual side or the metaphysical side to that human being and giving them what they need, right? So it's kind of tailoring the medicine to each person. And subhanAllah, but like what's, you know, modern day and age doing now? It's just treating everyone as like a subject of the same thing, right?
I mean, that's the reductionism of health. That's why dynamicism is important. But our dynamicism can only come if there is some unity, that there is something that we share. In our case, Quran and Sunnah, Tawheed. Well, they don't have, so their pyramid is up and down. They don't have anything that is uniting them, and then they're all trying to build theories and reflections, and the unification comes, everything should be same. This doesn't help the person with ADHD, by the way, because the whole aspect of one template for everyone comes from industrialization. If you look at, for example, the factories, car factories, all the cars needs to be created the same way with the same routine, and they're not unique. Our way of producing before modernity was unique. Every carpet, as I mentioned earlier, was unique, created uniquely. And this type of uniqueness is what allows people with ADHD to thrive, because they cannot be molded into one system that fits all. It doesn't happen like that. A person with ADHD has other ways of showcasing his or her talents or learning, you know. They learn by doing rather than just theoretically studying, you know. But this modernity, which wants to shape everybody and everything to be produced or to be acted upon in the same way, in the same methodology, in the same time frame, it's only made for production, not for reflection or contribution from a diverse point of view. And then there are people that then will become alienated, or they're going to be, you know, outcast. And then we label them with diagnoses and things, and we put the blame on them rather than put the blame on the society, which is not dynamic enough to allow them to learn in their way or contribute in their way. And we know for a fact as counselors that people with ADHD are very talented. Never divergent people are very talented. So it's about allowing that talent to channelize in a dynamic way that is suitable for them. But this modernity only has one size fits all, and that doesn't benefit a person who might learn or who might be creative in a different way. So the solution is to actually bring about a dynamic curriculum in schools, where actually I've seen with my own eyes, like, for instance, we're establishing within the ISIP the Futuwwah Academy of Sacred Manhood and Sacred Womanhood. And in Futuwwah, there is 5 elements of working with Futuwwah curriculum. 1 is adab, 2 is ilm, 3 is khidmah, 4 is sunnah disciplines, and 5 is craftsmanship. When you sit with some young boys that might be very high in energy, right, and do some grappling with them first, and then you start to study with them, they will be much more receive the knowledge much more thoroughly than if they don't, because then they have channelized their excessive energy. And why are they so much infused and have so much energy in this day and age? Is because we're disconnected from nature. Back in the days, you and I will probably chop some woods before we do an interview, because we needed to have fire, wood to have fire in our apartments, right? Now we can have electricity, right? So we were working with our bodies. Today we're not doing it. And then we have so much energy that is not externalized. And yet we eat so much sugar, we eat so much food, which affects us as well. So we're not burning calories. So in that sense, we need to bring back the holistic way of education, including working with our bodies and hands, inshallah.
That's such a really important point, because that's so congruent with temperament theory, because from what I was taught and explained, so I've said this example quite a few times on Boys in the Cave, but I think it's really eye-opening for me. So are you familiar with, you might be, when you go to Sydney, do you know Ahmed Karat from Maidan Archery Club?
I heard about him. I wanted to meet him, but he's unfortunately on
travels. He's overseas. Yeah, I think he's on competition. Yeah,
I wanted to meet him. I was so excited of meeting him. Next time. Shout out to Brother Ahmed, inshallah, next time.
He's a beautiful brother, mashallah. We got acquainted with his initiative and project, and I know there's archery session in Melbourne as well.
Brother Omar here in Melbourne.
Yeah, so they're all connected and doing wonderful things, and we've had Ahmed about 3 or 4 times on the podcast.
Beautiful.
And one of the one episode we did with Muhammad Ishaq, and Muhammad Ishaq was talking about similar topics what you were talking about, and then he actually Ahmed Kraft from his lessons actually gave an example where I think there were twins that one of them had speaking issues, so he wouldn't talk much But then what he realized is that the other brother is very talkative, very high energy, etc. So what's happened is, because of the high energy of the kid, that's made the other brother really closed off, because he's already very introverted and shy. So when there's so much high energy around you already, that's going to make an introverted person even more introverted, right? Because there's so much heat energy. And he was saying that because that kid was struggling to speak and was a bit slow, went to a speech pathologist. So parents were a bit worried about his situation. And what happened was, they were both, Ahmed noticed that this was the situation or the dynamic, so he separated both the brothers, and he was concentrating on the younger brother, the one that has speaking issues. And I wouldn't call it issues, it's probably not the right term, but he was saying that once he was getting into the motion of archery and holding the bow and doing his thing by himself, a week or two later, he actually made really drastic improvements with his speaking. And why I give this example is because it matches exactly with the example you gave, is that with someone that's hot energy, ADHD, when they're doing grappling, they're actually, so basically that person, that child that was introverted doing archery was in his element, right? So he has a certain temperament, and archery is a very melancholic earth temperament. In the disc analysis, it's like blue temperament activity. So when you get an earth temperament person, that's like being in their comfort zone. And some people, they've been in the opposite comfort zone, the opposite temperament their whole life because of the people around them, that they don't know what it means to be in their element, which is really sad, right? And so that's why that child was finally got a taste of what it means to be in his element, because of his high intense brother, very energetic brother. And compared to what you're giving the example about the child, ADHD child doing grappling and then doing schooling better, that's because he's in his element of fire.
Exactly.
And he can externalize that fire and he can nurture that fire, and then that'll help him be neutral in that sense, right?
Beautiful.
So it's so beautiful that in our tradition, it's not anything foreign, right? Like, this is in our tradition. And alhamdulillah, like, as I said, I'm not, like, I haven't done a psychology degree, but I've been with people.
Beautiful.
I've been around people, and I never got satisfactory answers. And once I engaged with this science, once I gave it a chance, so many of my answers got, alhamdulillah, like it came to me. A lot of questions got answered. So that's what I mean. It's all about, you know, doing the work, doing the knowledge, seeking the knowledge, alhamdulillah, and connecting with the right people. It just opens the whole world, right? And now I know, inshallah, like when I'm, like, now I have a responsibility, because I actually do part-time teaching. So I'm a maths tutor as well. And that's a lot of what's really interesting. A lot of parents now, they're very aware, like, the schooling system is bakwas, like, it's rubbish, because it's like, I always validate that, because it's like, ideally, if you look at it from a temperament lens, the schooling system is only for a melancholic earth temperament, because the teacher explains on a board, you just look at the details of what they're doing and the person responds accordingly. But there's so many different learning styles. It's like someone needs color. So an ADHD person probably needs color, stories and this and that to engage that person so they learn. But we're told that, oh no, we're rubbish students because we can't learn in the class. I struggled to learn in the classroom. So I had to get, when I was a kid, I don't have ADHD in that extreme sense, but I struggled in the classroom, and it's always debilitating for a child, because it's like, no, I'm just rubbish. I can't study. I can't process it. And you just internalize this your whole life up until you realize, like, wait, no, this is not like that black and white, right? So like the schooling system is flawed, and I was always having to explain to the students and the parents as well, like they need to upgrade, they need to do better, and you know, that's why I'm really passionate about that side of things. And even for people around me, my family, it's always understanding those dynamics and knowing what's better, what's the right action, right? For the sake of Allah, obviously, as well.
I appreciate it, Brother Tanzim. I mean, I think your insights are amazing. Your work is amazing.
Honestly, it's not from me, it's from Allah, but I've been connected with so many guests.
Everything is from Allah, and through our teachers and our brothers that are doing an amazing job, we learn and we grow, and sisters, of course, brothers and sisters are doing an amazing job. And I would say, I agree with you 100%. And I think that this is the problem of cancel culture. We're canceling individuals rather than canceling the school system or canceling the paradigms. Like, I'm very critical of cancel culture, because I believe that it individualizes the problems. Obviously, could be toxic individuals that, needs to take a pause, and that is correctly, and there is Islamic ways of dealing with that. But canceling youth, canceling people that that have not. It's not their fault that the school system is erred, but they are being cancelled, right? So we have a very individualized society where we are cancelling individuals, people, not cancelling a system, a pedagogical framework, a philosophical framework built upon, that a society is built upon, which is erred, which is, as you say, based upon a certain people with a certain, humor, or with a certain ways of learning, And this is why, we must go down to the etymological notion of what health means. Health, even in the English language, etymologically means whole. So to be healthy, you need to be whole. But the society today is not a wholesome society. And then we, rather stigmatize individuals who have neurodiversity or whatever. And we also believe in second and third chances. That's why we have tawbah. Let's say people that are, doing something wrong, we are, denying them fully, ways of rehabilitating themselves. It's because the society in itself is wrong and is not rehabilitated. And then we put the blame on them. We believe in tawbah. And actually, this was something that I thought about a lot before I came to your home, and I appreciate that. For instance, what happens with all these youths that are being cancelled from the school system, or even some of them might go to wrong, patterns in life. They might be active in street gangs or whatever, What happens with them? They will be labeled, right? Imagine if Malcolm X didn't give a second chance, rahimullah. He was in the prison, right, for a couple of years where he found Islam. Imagine that he was labeled, and then there was no avenue to tawbah and then repentance, and then look what he became. He became a person that brought millions of people back to Islam, including myself. Like in my teenage years, I don't come from a practicing Muslim family. I have experiences of being in Jahiliyyah, and Malcolm was one of my pathways towards Islam, and that is what I'm saying. Like, if we're canceling people, we might cancel awliyas, walis of Allah, without knowing it, because that most awliya are hidden, right? So we don't know who we're canceling, we don't know, and this society doesn't care as long as the society can make profit. But this is what we believe in. We believe in the profit before making profits. They believe in profits as the prophet. So we need to go back to that. We believe in authority, not authoritarian. They believe in so-called democracy or freedom or whatever, which becomes the firao, because they don't believe any authority beyond the materialistic needs, right? And people that are never divergent, or people that are spiritual, like you and I and all of our beloved listeners and brothers and sisters out there, we are spiritual. So in a sense, we are also pathologized by modernity. Can you imagine how many people have come to me, said, I went to this mainstream mental professional who was secular. They pathologized my spirituality, my belief in the unseen. I meet brothers that don't want to go to the psychiatry because they think that they will be pathologized because they believe in voices. They believe in the unseen. We try to help them to understand these voices rather than reject them and put them in the right place. Yes, sometimes it might be psychosis, obviously. But we also need to understand that many of the people that are labeled as psychotic today, or people that are labeled as, having psychosis or whatever, in historical sacred traditions, my beloved brother, they used to be the hakims of the town. Because we believed actually in the unseen as essential part of the societal fabric. So a person who might be today very eccentric or very, not so-called, quote-to-quote, normal, we would see, wow, this person is more beloved to Allah, has more access to the unseen than what you and I have. So we didn't label them. Today, many of the traditional hakims will be labeled as, crazy or lunatics or, with schizoid personalities, etc. So we need to bring back the metaphysical reality into the fabric of the society. And I think that will help help a lot of people to actually become modern hakims in the future. So imagine if you have this talent of feeling things that others don't feel. We will not reject it as a Muslim. But today we do, because we are so influenced by modernity and its view of, knowledge and knowledge inquiry, that everything that is unseen, we just reject it subconsciously as well. So if we bring back that type of, we bring back the unseen and integrate it to the seen within this societal framework, then this person who might have some aspect that we could label as mandub, which is to be eccentric, in a sense. I don't know the proper translation of the word mandub. It's not majnoon, because majnoon means crazy. Then actually this person, we say this person is inspired. This person is passionate. This person has, as they say in Urdu, jaspa, inspiration, or firasa, or, insights that are beyond maybe where I am, because I'm not in the same state of ahwal or hal or feeling or emotions, right? And suddenly this person can become somebody of a role model. And then this person can build his whole or her whole career in utilizing that and building something beneficial and become like a scholar or whatever, This is the beauty of us being compassionate and having the metaphysical reality integrated into our physical experiences. I hope it makes sense what I'm saying.
I mean, that's the aspect of reality, and unfortunately, a lot of us aren't in tune with it, and it's important to be in tune with that reality, and it's cognizant with the physical as well. It'll manifest in the physical if you're aware of the spiritual as well. Subhanallah. And I wanted to ask you about about ADHD. Have you come across any works in our Islamic tradition that sort of answers and what can and things that can be done in order to address the issues around ADHD?
It's a very important question, and actually we need more research. We need to look at more traditional sources to find, whether there is manuals. Certainly there are manuals with regards to how to deal with, cognitive errored ways of thinking and reflecting, whether it's directly connected to ADHD, Allahu Alam. I would say that we need to do more research, and maybe we need to also work with some Islamization of knowledge, and maybe we should also look at what ADHD comes from. And I believe that the Futuwwah curriculums addressed this without mentioning it, as for instance, how to build your, hudur and your concentration, and your presence by working holistically with the tarbiyah of the young males, for instance. That was quite, common within the Futuwwah manuscripts to speak about these things, and the tarbiyah being holistic. As I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, the 5 elements of Futuwwah is a holistic thing that, addresses your body, your jasad, or your jism, your emotions, your ihsas, your cognitive faculty, your aql, your, behavior inclinations and nafs, and also your spiritual connections and your ruh. And finally, they try to integrate everything into your metaphysical heart, which is the balance of all of our health, which is our qalb, right? So the curriculum was very holistic, right? And it gave young males opportunities to come into sacred manhood through rites of passages as well. And just to connect that to neurodiversity, this type of holistic curriculum was, in a sense, perfect for people with neurodiversity. Whether they labeled it as neurodiversity, I haven't seen any type of terminology that is referring to this terminology of ADHD. Nevertheless, even things that are hyper means overactive, often comes from an aspect of our, for instance, we'll take the example of OCD. Now, OCD and ADHD is 2 different things, but there's a spectrum, and they're in the same spectrum in the sense that OCD can be obsessions and compulsions that could lead to, lack of concentration or too much concentrating on the details rather than larger picture. There's actually a beautiful story from Rumi, from the Masnavi, or from the stories of the Rumi. Some of them are not directly from Masnavi, but nevertheless, Rumi mentions about the story of the ant walking on the carpet, on the Persian carpet, and feels the bumps and things, and doesn't understand why is it so many bumps here and there. I don't understand this, and this because the ant doesn't see the fuller picture. The ant doesn't have the metacognition, the bird's eye view of seeing that this this is actually carpet, and all these bumps are like, patterns in a beautiful whole, which only the craftsman who is creating the carpet can see. If we take that into understanding neurodiversity, sometimes people with neurodiversity can see the bigger picture better than what we can. And then we might feel like they're like in a different hal. Where are they somewhere? And sometimes maybe people might only see the bump and then don't see the fuller picture, So this could be like both the benefits, and perhaps we all are neurodiverse, by the way. I might be neurodiverse, you. So there is no neuronormality. Actually, Gabor Mate speaks about in the book, The Myth of Normal, that everybody is neurodivergent. What is the norm? What is not the norm? Allahu alam. So the bird's eye view, sometimes some people might have difficulties for that because they're more focused on the details. And sometimes people can only be in the bird's eye view without seeing the details. That's why the balance is the best point of view here. And then that could lead to losing the higher, perspective of things. And you get stuck like in a certain framework or in a certain thought or in a certain pattern, and you don't see the fuller pattern, the fuller picture. And that is something that you can deal with, that you can see on OCD, for instance. People with OCD, they tend to, for instance, only focus on the detail. It needs to be perfect, without seeing the beyond that. But for instance, that rituals becomes the point of worship, rather than understanding that the rituals, you're not worshiping the rituals, you're worshiping Allah through the rituals, right? So you're not worshiping Islam, you're worshiping Allah through Islam, right? So then you need to help them to bring them to the meta perspective, to the meta cognition. And that is often connected to an overactive nafs al-lawama, the reproachable self. Nafs al-lawama in a balanced form is very healthy. It gives you warning when you're about to do something wrong. And if you do wrong, it puts some blame in it. It induces some healthy anxiety that you shouldn't do it again, so you repent. But for people with OCD, for instance, it's overactive. So it makes warning and blaming to things that are not even haram, and then that is because you're only seeing the detail. It needs to be perfect. And then you're adhering to a label of perfection, which we as human beings will never achieve, right? That's why we need to embrace imperfection. That is one of the, universal principles pertaining thoughts, for instance, obsessions, and how to deal with compulsions. And this overactive lawama leads to, unhealthy patterns that makes people who, for instance, have all these OCD difficulty to live life and reach the fullest potential. And then we need to bring that nafs al-lawama back to the healthy state by, telling people that you can accept the fact that, if you've done it 3 times, then leave it. Doubt doesn't override certainty, for instance, So these type of things, there are manuals in our tradition of how to deal with, and you can actually also, from an Islamic psychological point of view, come with very sound explanation of why is the reason that people might, experience these type of detail-oriented things, and also how to find solutions for it, inshallah.
So I have a lot of thoughts. I know we're a bit short on time. You're a busy man, but when it comes to, so we talked about, you mentioned normal, like what is normal, right? And I've had these same thoughts where you look at everyone, it's about embracing everyone's uniqueness. Everyone brings something to the table. And so it's like when, I don't know if this is like a Western psychology thing, but let's just say it is, for my sake of making my point. Sometimes it feels like Western psychology, it's like it wants you to become this particular person, right? It's like, okay, if you're in this box, then you're normal. And I feel that from the Islamic standpoint, back to the Western way of how they want humans to be like, it's like, why does the Western world want us to become a certain person in a certain way? And my sort of theory is more like so that we can be good capitalist workers and work for the system. So psychology facilitates, the Western psychology facilitates that perfect sort of archetype of a human being that will be a good worker and good at, not being, too obsessive or not being in the excesses, but being a good capitalist worker so that they can make and produce for the state and, contribute to society, right? So for me, looking at it from the Islamic standpoint, obviously we don't look at it from that paradigm, but it's always, we want to be want to be as close as possible to the Rasul in his actions and behavior, right? And that's what we should be striving towards. So it's really interesting. I don't know what Western psychology wants us to be in, why they want us to be in a certain box, but that's just my theory of why it's just contributing to the society in that way. And
you're correct. I mean, honestly, that's why I don't work with insurance. I'm not against people working with insurance, by the way. I'm just speaking from because sometimes, I mean, insurance could be good for a lot of Muslims who don't have, money to pay for, mental health services. And then, of course, insurance could be really good. But why I chose actively to not work with it is because, one, I want to work with Islamic psychology, which I don't think all insurance, accept, at least in countries in Europe where there is a lot of Islamophobia and mental health practices. And the second is also because insurances tell, okay, you can have 8 sessions CBT. And then you need to be done. And they only offer CBT because CBT is, I mean, I'm not against CBT, but CBT is like, okay, change your cognitive framework and that's it. Then you're back to work because it's all about making you ready for work. It doesn't heal. It doesn't work with healing. It doesn't allow the healing trajectory to be something that might take time, because it's all about, as you said, perfectly, brother, to make you ready for work again. That's the only standard of health. And we as Muslims, we believe in mu'alama. We believe in amal as a virtue. To work is a virtue. But it's how you work and in which way you work. And it's a holistic thing. Work is part of it. Health is part of it. Being able to take care of yourself is part of it. To be able to have a sound aql. These are all the objectives of Sharia. Like work is definitely part of it. But to isolate that and just speak about that as the only way where we can, see or we can measure whether you're healthy or not is very, as you said, connected to industrialization and capitalism. We as Muslims, we're in the middle ground. There is no secular ideology that could fully, represent Islam. Sometimes we say like, Islam is this, Islam is that. Islam has everything and much more. We're not against tijara. We're not against making money, as long as you want to do khair with the money. But if you think that all your health is about making money, well, what happens with those who are doing khidmah that doesn't make money? Are they less of a human beings because they're servants or, they're khadims or khadimas, So you're definitely touching on something. And I think that psychology, mainstream psychology, I would say, is definitely today running the errands, some of it at least, of, the capitalist narrative of human health. That's why medication comes always as the first or second option. You have anxiety directly. Okay, give him some, antidepressives. Now, I am pragmatic in the sense I'm not against medication. I'm against it being the only option that is provided, right? Sometimes, as I mentioned, in OCD or other situations, you might need it. That's why we need psychiatrists that have a Muslim framework that can understand the complexity of it and that have a holistic approach towards it. But to just give it as the only means or that CBT is the only means, that is what I'm against. I believe that there should be a variety of ways, and sometimes maybe 8 sessions is enough and sometimes it's not. A lot of clients, they come to me, they say, how many sessions, brother? I said, I don't know, maybe 2, maybe 10. Allah decides. Allah might heal you in the second session. Allah might heal you without me coming into your life. And sometimes you need to be in 2-3 years. Like I go to therapy still today, and that is part of being an Islamic psychology practitioner. You need to purify yourself. You need to polish your heart. I go every week as much as possible because I'm not better than my clients. I have the similar struggles. So it's a way for you to reflect and to also polish yourself so that you don't project yourself and your struggles onto your own, onto your clients. So yeah, just to finalize and summarize, just to build upon your excellent point, my beloved brother, it's that we need to bring psychology back to the soul. And we need to bring back a holistic, way of seeing health and human being and what constitutes human being. And in that, we would need to also reframe, the ways that we are working with mental health. We need to build our own institution, our own psychiatric wards. And the Darul Shifas of our tradition, the house of healing of tradition. Just imagine, brother, our traditional hospitals were called Darul Shifa, house of healing. If you go to a modern hospital today, do you find healing there? The architecture, very monotheist, very like Spartan, very, you know, it's almost like you get sick going there, honestly, you know. And I have a colleague in ISIP, in our Shifaa Institute. She did her master thesis. She's an interior designer, and how to work with interior design of the hospitals to see if that helps a patient's healing trajectory. And she actually designed a hospital, and she compared with a hospital that didn't have a nice interior design, and she could see in her research and her findings the difference of how that affected the patient's health.
That's amazing. That's an amazing point you bring up, because like tying it to Islamic spirituality, we know that a nice clean place has a lot of barakah. If it's like the architecture is beautiful, amazing, it's going to have barakah, right? So if it's like something that looks bad and it looks bad, it makes you sick when you're going there, how's that going to bring barakah, right? So we have that conception in our tradition. And mashallah, that story you brought about the sister and architecture implementing a hospital, like that's such a beautiful thing. That's like bringing that spirituality to the mix when it comes to the healing side for these patients. And like for sure, it would definitely, like Allah says it, right? We know it will work, right?
It's ihsan, right? I mean, sometimes people say to me, we just need a place to pray. Yes, of course we need that. But we need beauty. Like you go to the Ottoman masajids, or you see pictures of the masajids and, you know, in the Persian culture sphere, or in Morocco, or in Egypt, or in, you know, in Mali, you know, in Pakistan, in Bangladesh, in India. Wow, Indonesia. These are beautiful, beautiful, beautiful places of worship, right? Every detail, every marveling, every calligraphy, every tile is perfectly made, beautiful design, beautiful, you know, arts. This is all connected to health. Like in West, brother, in Sweden where I live, I don't know how it is in Australia. I think you guys have beautiful masajids. You see some of the masjids in the outskirts of the town, you know, in a factory, you know, in a neighborhood. And it's not the Muslims' fault. We don't get good land pieces from, you know, from the government or from the municipalities. So what does that affect the psyche of the young boys or girls? They don't see that we used to be kings and queens. They will not strive. And ihsan is about beauty, perfecting your practices of your deen, right? So we need to bring in beauty into our spiritual spaces, but also our psychological spaces, our medical spaces. Like I have my clinic in Sweden. Right now I have it online, but I used to have it offline. I had carpets there. I had like calligraphy on the wall. I had like an interior designer actually who helped me to design. I had like a water fountain that I put on because I believe in sound and therapy, and the sound of water gives a lot of healing. So actually some of youths came to my clinical practice and they were astonished. They were like, wow, they felt sakina, they felt peace. And they were shocked. Can a space look like this? Because they're used to schools where there is so like Spartan, there is no beautiful design. The acoustic really gives you tinnitus, you know, and suddenly, and just being in that space gave them sakina and health. So imagine when you combine that with pedagogy in the school. So you have school, education, and then you have beautiful space where you're learning. And then you will find students that will excel in their studies, inshallah.
Definitely so true. And just probably wrapping up a final point from my end, we talked about reclaiming the Islamic tradition and bringing it to the forefront. And we were talking about like OCD and ADHD. And so with my what I've learned from Temperament Theory, like I've actually had long discussions with my co-host Rafeeq. He's worked... Alhamdulillah, we both studied the temperament theory, but he's actually worked in mental health spaces. So he would have clients that were like people that were in jail and drug dealers and these kind of people that were, some people like they had these symptoms that they were so frozen they can't get out of the house, right? So he dealt with those kind of extreme situations with certain clients, and he's applied that temperament theory, seeing if it works, if it doesn't work, all that kind of thing. And we've had long discussions about, you know, OCD, ADHD, and using our temperament theory and understanding those, you know, ADHD and OCD. We could kind of see that perhaps we're not making an outright kind of statement, but just from our working knowledge, it's like a specific temperament is more susceptible to ADHD, and one specific temperament is susceptible to OCD. So I'm not recommending anyone to diagnose someone in the OCD using the temperament, but it's just to throw that idea out of curiosity, because like sanguine or the yellow temperament, they're more susceptible to ADHD as a result of their high energy level, their curiosity for things. So that's why they don't concentrate more, because people see it as a negative, but it's actually a positive. They're more curious about things. They want to know what's all around them. They're like butterflies in that regard. OCD, melancholics are very detail-oriented. They're a very specific way of doing things. They're a bit more structured in that sense. And maybe at excesses at times that can create that OCD way of approaching things that we do notice in psychology as well. So, but the thing is, it's like there's not enough research done when it comes to understanding that holistic side of things, of temperament theory and all that, and combining it with what we're observing ADHD is and OCD is in the modern day. But we need people to do both, like synthesizing that information. It's really, really important. And
I appreciate that, and I believe in that, and I think that as you rightfully said, we shouldn't diagnose, but it's a good way of us having hypotheses, you know. I never diagnose clients, but I have hypotheses, and I work from different frameworks, and humor theory is amazing. Islamic psychology is amazing. And of course, there are other modalities that we can utilize. There is somatic experiencing, which is to work from the physical components to see where how trauma is capsulated in your body. Through experiencing physically the trauma again, you can release that, you know, anxiety that has been captured in your body. There is forest bathing, which is to go out in the forest and just, you know, enjoy nature as a way to bring healing. There's bibliotherapy, where you can read works of Imam Ghazali, the poetry of Rumi or Hafiz, and find meaning in it. And there is narrative practice, there is logotherapy, and so many modalities that we can Islamicize and use. And of course, in our tradition, we have so many beautiful approaches like tahdib al-akhlaq, which is refinement of character, etc. And actually, for me, use the tools that people can relate to as well. Like I work with youths, I work with Futuwwah, and in the ISIP, as I mentioned before, we're going to do the Futuwwah Academy. I'm a former hip-hop artist, brother, and for many years I haven't rapped. Since I reverted to Islam, I left, and actually thanks to my teachers and the shuyukh, I, alhamdulillah, finally feel like I can revisit, because I had a lot of trauma with music, but not hip-hop per se, but the industry, which is really very bad industry, the record labels and stuff. Now, I digress. What I would say is that why not use hip-hop to bring youth to something of khair and health, but do it in a fitri way, in a way according to Quran and Sunnah. We can use the nasheeds as health. Actually, traditionally, they had music therapy. They had aroma therapy. You can use oud, bukhur. You can use melodies and hymns and nasheeds to help people to bring back to health, and also to disseminate sacred knowledge to tools that next generation or the youth can relate to. So we need to be very curious but grounded. We need to be very pedagogical. I love etymology. So pedagogy in Latin means to go aside someone. Go like what do you say in English? Aside? You say aside when you go, if somebody goes with you, like you go on the beside someone. How do you say that?
I guess
yeah. Please forgive me. English is not my native tongue. So it's like going with someone. It's not to point fingers and teach them with, like, it's to go with them. You know, it's kind of like the same. Like an irshad is a person who guides by showing the path, right? So it's the same significance, right? So we need to bring this pedagogy, and in that, hopefully, more people will be included rather than stigmatized and labeled with diagnosis that actually doesn't mean anything. Because yes, it's good to know that some person might have problems with concentration, but ultimately, is it their fault or is it the pedagogy's fault? Is it their fault or is it the fault of the system? I believe that the fault of the system is important to reflect upon, and then hopefully we can build modalities and revive modalities from our sacred tradition that could be a benefit for brothers and sisters and Muslims, inshallah.
Inshallah. And I appreciate you coming this way, having this conversation. It was honestly, like, this kind of conversation can go on for 4 or 5 hours. Yes. Maybe one day we could literally do a 4 or 5 hour episode, inshallah. I've actually done that with guests, and honestly, that's probably, you get the most juice, because we have so much to talk, there's so much to discuss. It's never ending.
I love it, man. I love watching Joe Rogan. Sometimes he has good guests, and he has 4 or 5 hours talk. So crazy. We can have a Muslim version of Joe Rogan. Why not?
I don't see why not. Exactly. Yeah. So I don't know if you had any final thoughts, anything you feel like you didn't touch that you wanted to talk about before I wrap up. I'll wrap up on this book.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I just want to thank you, my beloved brother, for inviting me to be part of this. I want to thank all of the listeners, all of the beloved brothers and sisters for listening, for supporting independent Muslim media, and for wanting to disseminate sacred knowledge. I'm just just a seeker of knowledge. I'm just a student. My gratitude goes first and foremost to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but also to all of my beautiful teachers and the mashayikh and the shuyukh that I studied under. We need to continue study. We need to continue understand psychology from Islamic paradigm. I invite you all to join our efforts within the ISIP, the International Students of Islamic Psychology, and our different initiatives like, for instance, Futuwwah Academy for Sacred Manhood and Womanhood, to really revive tradition and deal with contemporary era. Like some of my teachers, like Dr. Shanturk says, we need rooted revival. So it's about rooted revival. So the ihya needs to be grounded. So I want to thank you for beautiful questions. I learned so much by listening to you, my beloved brother. Please support Brothers in Cave podcast, share it in all of your social medias, and feel free to follow us in ISIP and all the things I'm doing. I'm actually soon also starting to create some nasheeds. I hope I can guest you again and share my music in the future. Sure. And hopefully we're establishing new therapeutic modality based on Islamic psychology. I'm trying to create a Futuwwah modality of healing for Muslim boys and men. So hopefully these will be things that we can reflect upon, and I will be honored to join your podcast again, and I will definitely listen because you have so many great guests. So I want to thank the beautiful people and brothers and sisters in Australia and Melbourne. You've been so hospitable towards me, and to all listeners all over the world. Let's unite, because this is the generation and the time of ummah and creating communities, and I'm looking forward to create communities in different disciplines, including Islamic psychology. So please join our movement and please be part of ambassadors for khair and khidmah, inshallah.
Appreciate that, and thank you so much. Like, all your insights and your knowledge and experience have been very beneficial, sharing all that knowledge and, you know, keeping that curiosity going for others, so hopefully they can delve into these sort of subjects and learn more and even teach us, right? Because we're all teachers and students, right?
Of course. I mean, I always see people as living books. Exactly. I learned so much by people listening.
Has so many unique experiences, and I was just sitting with everyone and just getting a taste of that, and then learning from that. It's so beautiful, right?
So we are all living books, and I just also want to say, please forgive me for any shortcomings. If I said anything wrong, did anything wrong, rest assured that I always say that I'm a person with a lot of errors in my character. Allah knows that. If anything khair came from me, it's all from Allah, and all the mistakes are solid in mine. I would love to hear you wrap up this, brother. Please tell us.
Because we mentioned about this book in passing. Right. Like, this is, you know, we talked about capitalism and psychology, and like, this is basically a book, like, if you already have a working, if the listeners already have a working knowledge of temperament theory, this is basically like a good refresher in that regard. But the problem is, like, this is geared towards like a worker, like a capitalist worker. Mm-hmm. So it's about saying, like, okay, if you're working with this person, then you should behave like this to get the best out of them. So it's like, that's what really made me like really upset in some ways, because it's like the whole book, it doesn't even talk about how can we improve as the individual. Yeah. What temperament are we? And then figuring out, like, okay, what can I do better, right, to be a better human being? But this author, I'm not saying he might have different books, you know, touching on that kind of self and how to make one better. But this is about, like, oh, this guy is this temperament, therefore you have to act like this to get out of them what you need for the sake of capitalism. For the worker. So it's all geared towards the ends. It's like,
this is what
becoming a good worker, or working well with others so that they can become good workers. And brother, so I didn't really,
I just want to, this is also the problem with secular spirituality that we see today, secularization. We have a lecture on ISIP's YouTube channel. I recommend you guys to listen. This is with Dr. Fatima Abdullah. She's the wife of Professor Malik Bedri, who's the father of Islamic psychology. She speaks about secular spirituality, where you take some things from our tradition and then you secularize them. And probably this guy, I haven't read it, takes the humor theory, and he want to, make it serve capitalism. Yeah, exactly. So this is actually something that we try to, work against. And I want to thank all of my colleagues and ISIP brothers and sisters for doing the amazing work and actually not allowing this type of things being done in our tradition, to take concept from our tradition and just take it away from Sharia. That's what they did with Rumi, brother. They took Rumi and took him away from Quran and Sunnah. They made him into a hippie figure. He was a Qadi. He was a Hanafi scholar. He was a person who wrote his love was influenced by the love of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So we need to retake and bring our tradition back home. So thank you.
True. And just wrapping up, that reminds me of, there was actually a statement, an example that Zizek talks about for decaffeinated coffee. So it's kind of encapsulates exactly what you were mentioning, where, you know, the West just wants to take out something for their own means. Exactly. And so in the case of decaffeinated coffee, it's like taking out what you need, but like, you know,
leave out Sharia.
That's exactly what
because they can't handle it, right? Yeah.
So, it's always a good reminder for us. So much work to be done in that regard. But thank you so much for your time, and for everyone that's listened in, I appreciate you tuning in. And check us out on our social media. We're mostly active on Instagram. Inshallah, we're looking to start a book club, so stay tuned for that as well. And we'll put all the links for ISIP and everything in the show notes, inshallah. So from my special guest Seyed Jamaluddin, thank you for coming. So I'm Tanzim. We're wrapping up, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, brother Tanzim and all listeners. Jazakallah khair, brother. Thank you so much, man. It was beautiful. Thank you so much.
Wish we had more time.